For nearly 9 years, the house on Willow Creek Lane had been filled with waiting. Waiting for test results, waiting for phone calls that never came, waiting for hope that slowly learned how to disguise itself as patience. Daniel and Laura Whitman were not unhappy people, but there was a quiet ache woven into their daily routines. Daniel left for work every morning at 6:45, returning after sunset with the same tired smile. Laura worked part-time from home, filling her hours with organization, cleaning, and the kind of silence that grows heavier when it has too much space to live in. They had learned how to move around the absence of a child, how not to speak of it too often, how to pretend that the spare bedroom at the end of the hallway was simply a storage room. But one winter evening, Laura stood in that doorway longer than usual. The room smelled faintly of cardboard and old wood. Boxes were stacked against the wall, untouched for years. Something inside her shifted, not dramatically, not loudly, but decisively. "I can't keep waiting for something that may never happen," she said later that night. That was when adoption entered their lives. The process was long, emotionally draining, and full of uncertainty. Interviews, paperwork, home visits, background checks, every step felt like another test they were afraid to fail. 18 months passed in cautious hope. Then, on a cold morning in early March, the phone rang. "There is a boy," the social worker said. "3 years old, quiet, intelligent. He's been moved twice already." The photo arrived by email that afternoon. The boy had large, thoughtful eyes that seemed far too serious for his age. His hair was dark and slightly unkempt, as if no one had ever bothered to style it properly. He was not smiling, but there was no sadness either. Just observation, as though he were constantly measuring the world around him. Laura cried without fully understanding why. They named him Adam. When Adam arrived at their home in April, he carried everything he owned in a small, worn backpack. 2 sets of clothes, a thin blanket, and a broken plastic car, missing one wheel. He stood in the entryway, silent, his eyes moving carefully from wall to wall, door to door, as if memorizing escape routes. "Welcome home," Laura said softly, kneeling in front of him. Adam nodded. He did not speak. In the days that followed, Adam revealed himself as a child who took up as little space as possible. He ate quietly. He never complained. He never asked for toys or attention. When spoken to, he responded politely but without warmth. When left alone, he sat perfectly still, as though movement itself were a risk. At night, Daniel would whisper his fears into the darkness. "What if he never opens up? What if we fail him the way others did?" Laura always answered the same way, though she was no longer sure she believed it. "He just needs time." The house had a small backyard, bordered by old trees and a narrow strip of unused land at the back. Beyond that land stood a locked wooden door that led into a storage room, attached to the house but long forgotten. It had belonged to a previous owner, someone who had left in a hurry years ago, leaving behind boxes no one had ever bothered to open. Adam noticed that door on his third day in the house. He stood in front of it for a long time, his small hand resting against the cool wood. Laura watched from the kitchen window, expecting him to lose interest and walk away. He didn't. Something about that door seemed to pull him, not with curiosity, but with recognition. As if, without knowing why, he already understood that whatever waited behind it would change everything. That night, for the first time since arriving, Adam spoke a full sentence. "Can I go in there tomorrow?" he asked quietly, pointing toward the storage room. Laura hesitated. She had no idea why, but a strange feeling settled in her chest. Neither fear nor comfort, but something in between. "Yes," she said finally. "Tomorrow." She did not know then that the silence in their home was about to be replaced. Not with noise, but with meaning. The next morning arrived with a pale spring sun filtering through the curtains. Adam woke earlier than usual and sat on the edge of his bed, already dressed, his small hands folded in his lap. Laura noticed it immediately. There was no restlessness, no uncertainty in him, only quiet anticipation. "You're up early," she said gently. Adam nodded. "You said today." She knew exactly what he meant. After breakfast, Laura retrieved the old key from the drawer where previous owners had left it, unlabeled and nearly forgotten. The metal felt colder than she expected. As they walked down the narrow hallway toward the back of the house, Adam stayed close to her side, his steps light but purposeful. The storage room door creaked as it opened, releasing a smell of dust, dry wood, and time. The space inside was small but deep, lit only by a narrow window near the ceiling. Sunlight entered in thin, slanted lines, illuminating floating particles in the air. Boxes were stacked unevenly along the walls. Some were sealed, others half open, their contents long abandoned. Old clothes, broken tools, stacks of yellowed papers tied with string. It looked like the kind of place no one truly saw anymore. Adam stepped inside without hesitation. He moved past the boxes, not touching anything at first, his eyes scanning the room slowly, deliberately, as though he were searching for something specific. Laura watched him, unsure why her heart had begun to beat faster. Then Adam stopped. In the far corner of the room, partially hidden behind a collapsed cardboard box, lay a wooden chest. It was small, no bigger than a suitcase, wrapped in faded cloth and covered in a fine layer of dust. The chest did not look valuable, it did not demand attention. Yet Adam walked straight toward it. He knelt down and brushed the dust away with his sleeve. The cloth slipped aside, revealing the lid. There was no lock. "Can I open it?" he asked. Laura hesitated only a moment. "Yes." Adam lifted the lid carefully, as if he were afraid of startling whatever lay inside. Within the chest was a single object wrapped in plain brown fabric. No markings, no labels, just layers, folded neatly. Adam unwrapped it slowly. It was a book. Not new, not decorative. Its cover was simple, dark green, worn smooth at the edges. The pages inside were thin and slightly yellowed, the script unfamiliar to Laura. Flowing, elegant lines that moved from right to left. Adam touched the cover with both hands. Something in the room shifted. It was subtle, impossible to explain, but Laura felt it immediately. A stillness that felt intentional, as if the room itself were holding its breath. Adam did not smile, he did not speak. He simply sat there, cross-legged on the dusty floor, holding the book against his chest. "What is it?" Laura asked softly. Adam looked up at her. His eyes were calm, focused. "A good book," he said. "It's kind." That answer made no sense, yet Laura found herself unable to question it. Adam opened the book. He could not read. Not really. He did not know the language, yet his finger traced the lines on the page with gentle precision. His lips moved, quietly at first, then a little louder. He repeated certain sounds, certain rhythms, not randomly but consistently, as though he had heard them before. Laura felt a shiver run down her spine. Adam read the same page for several minutes. When he finished, he closed the book and pressed his forehead against it briefly, a gesture that felt instinctive, ancient, and deeply out of place in the life of a 3-year-old child. "I like this room," he said. "Can I come back?" "Yes," Laura whispered, though she didn't remember deciding. From that day on, Adam returned to the storage room every afternoon. He would sit in the same spot, open the same book, and softly repeat the words he could not possibly understand. Each time he did, his restlessness faded. His breathing slowed. The tension in his small shoulders melted away. Daniel noticed the change before Laura mentioned the book. "He seems lighter," he said one evening. "Like he finally feels safe." Laura didn't answer right away, because deep down she knew this wasn't just comfort. It was connection. And whatever that book was, it had not been forgotten. It had been waiting. By the second week, Adam's visits to the storage room had become part of the house's unspoken rhythm. He returned from daycare, placed his shoes neatly by the door, and walked straight down the hallway without being reminded. Laura would hear the soft creak of the storage room door, then silence. Deep, complete silence, the kind that felt deliberate rather than empty. At first she worried. 3-year-olds were not meant to sit still for long. They were meant to run, to shout, to scatter toys across the floor. Yet Adam could remain in that room for 20 minutes at a time, unmoving except for the gentle turning of pages. When Laura peeked in once, she expected to find him distracted or bored. Instead, she found him focused. Adam sat cross-legged on the floor, the book resting on his knees. His finger moved slowly across the lines of text, following each curve and dot with reverence. His lips formed sounds that did not belong to any language Laura recognized. Soft, melodic phrases repeated with care, as though accuracy mattered deeply to him. She didn't interrupt. Something in his posture told her she shouldn't. Later that evening, Daniel asked, "What exactly is that book?" Laura hesitated before answering. "I don't know. I know what it is now." She paused. "It's the Quran." Daniel frowned slightly. "How do you know?" "I looked it up," she admitted. "The script? The layout? It's unmistakable. Daniel leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. And Adam can read it? No, Laura said quickly. He can't read at all. He doesn't know Arabic. He doesn't even know the alphabet properly yet. Then what is he doing in there every day? Laura didn't have an answer that made sense. What they both noticed, however, was the change in Adam. He began to sleep through the night without waking in fear. The tightness around his eyes softened. He laughed, quietly at first, then more freely. He still spoke little, but when he did, his words carried unusual clarity for a child his age. Once, while Laura was overwhelmed with anxiety over an unpaid bill, Adam walked into the kitchen, placed his small hand over hers, and said, "It's okay. Don't be scared." She stared at him. "Why would you say that?" He shrugged, the way children do when the answer feels obvious. "Because everything is watched." Another time, Daniel snapped at a driver in traffic, only to hear Adam's small voice from the back seat. "Anger makes the heart heavy." Daniel said nothing for the rest of the drive. Neither of them had taught him these things. When Laura asked Adam what the book said, he answered honestly, "I don't know the words." "Then how do you know what it means?" she asked. Adam thought for a long moment. "It feels true," he said finally. "Like when you know something is right even before you learn its name." That night, Laura opened the Quran herself for the first time. She found an English translation online and read quietly while Adam slept. She did not understand everything, but certain verses seemed to speak directly into the parts of her she had kept locked away. Fear, loss, the ache of waiting, protection, mercy, guidance, trust. The next day, she noticed something else. Adam was no longer choosing random pages. He always opened the book to the same sections. He lingered over certain passages, repeating the same sounds again and again. It was as if the book itself was guiding him, drawing his attention where it was needed most. And then came the moment that unsettled her more than anything else. One afternoon, Adam closed the Quran, looked up at her, and said calmly, "This book doesn't like to be hidden." Laura felt a chill run through her. "What do you mean?" "It was alone for a long time," Adam said, "but it still helped." That was when Laura realized something profound and frightening. Adam wasn't learning from the Quran. He was responding to it. And whatever was awakening in him was not imagination, coincidence, or comfort. It was the beginning of something that would soon demand to be heard. The change came quietly, the way most serious things do. It was a Wednesday afternoon, warm for early May, the kind of day that invited open windows and careless ease. Laura was in the kitchen preparing dinner, the sound of vegetables chopping against the board filling the house. Adam had returned from daycare and, as usual, walked straight toward the storage room. For nearly 20 minutes, everything remained calm. Then the silence broke. Adam came running down the hallway, not fast in the careless way children run, but urgent, controlled, as if every second mattered. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a focus Laura had never seen before. "Mom," he said, breathless, "something is wrong." The knife slipped from Laura's hand and clattered against the counter. "Adam, what's wrong? Did you get hurt?" He shook his head. "Not me. It's over there." He pointed toward the wall that separated their house from the neighboring property. "It smells bad. It's dangerous." Laura frowned, trying to steady her breathing. "Smells bad how?" Adam searched for words. "Like air that shouldn't be there." The phrase made no sense, yet it sent a sharp chill through her chest. "Where did you hear that?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. Adam looked down at his hands. "From the book, from the quiet part." Laura's heart began to pound. Their neighbor, Mr. Reynolds, was an elderly man who lived alone. He kept mostly to himself, tending his small backyard garden and rarely leaving the house. Laura had spoken to him only a handful of times, polite exchanges over the fence. "Adam," she said carefully, kneeling in front of him, "did you smell anything yourself?" He shook his head again. "No, but it's there. It's leaking." Leaking. Laura stood up slowly. Every rational part of her mind told her this was coincidence, imagination, the echo of words Adam had heard somewhere. But another part, the part that had been watching her child change, soften, focus, refused to ignore the urgency in his voice. "All right," she said finally. "Let's check." She walked outside with Adam close behind her. The air was still, carrying the scent of grass and distant traffic. Nothing smelled unusual. Still, Laura approached the fence and called out, "Mr. Reynolds? Miss Reynolds?" A moment later, the back door of the neighboring house opened. Mr. Reynolds stepped out, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Everything okay?" he asked kindly. Laura hesitated, then chose honesty over pride. "This might sound strange, but have you noticed any unusual smells in your house? Gas, maybe?" Mr. Reynolds' Mr. Reynolds' expression shifted. "Funny you ask," he said slowly. "The last couple of nights I have smelled something sweet in the kitchen. I thought it was just old pipes." Laura felt her stomach drop. "Would you mind calling the gas company?" she asked. "Just to be safe." Within an hour, a technician arrived. Laura stood on her porch, Adam sitting quietly beside her, the Quran resting against his chest. The technician disappeared around the side of Mr. Reynolds' house, tools clanking. When he returned, his face was serious. "There's a leak," he said. "Small but dangerous. It's behind the wall near the kitchen. Another few days and this could have been bad. Very bad." Mr. Reynolds turned pale. "I had no idea." Laura's knees weakened. She steadied herself against the railing. Later that evening, Mr. Reynolds came over, his voice shaking with gratitude. "How did your boy know?" he asked. "He couldn't have smelled it from outside." Laura looked at Adam, who sat on the floor playing quietly with his toy car. "I don't know," she admitted. That night, after Adam was asleep, Laura told Daniel everything. The storage room, the Quran, the warning. Daniel listened in silence, his face tight. "It was a coincidence," he said finally, though the words lacked conviction. "It has to be." "How many coincidences make a pattern?" Laura asked softly. Daniel had no answer. In the storage room, the Quran lay open to the same page Adam had read earlier that day. Laura did not understand Arabic, but one line in the translation she later searched stood out, pressing itself into her memory. "And we send down of the Quran that which is a healing and a mercy." Laura closed the book with trembling hands. For the first time, she understood something deeply unsettling. The warning had not come from fear. It had come from guidance. And this was only the beginning. The days after the gas leak passed in uneasy calm. Daniel tried to return to routine, throwing himself into work, fixing small things around the house as if order could push away questions. Laura moved through her days with a new awareness, as though the walls themselves were listening. Adam, meanwhile, seemed lighter than ever. He laughed more easily, slept more deeply, and returned to the storage room each afternoon with quiet certainty. Laura did not interfere. She watched. It was the following Monday that the second warning came. Laura had lived with anxiety for most of her adult life. It was not crippling, but it was persistent, like a low hum beneath her thoughts. Years earlier, her doctor had prescribed medication that she took regularly without thinking. Same dosage, same pharmacy, same routine. That afternoon, Laura returned home from the pharmacy and placed the small white bottle on the kitchen counter while putting away groceries. Adam was sitting at the table, coloring carefully inside the lines. He looked up the moment the bottle touched the counter. He stopped coloring, his eyes fixed on the bottle with sudden intensity. "Mom," he said quietly, "don't take that." Laura turned, surprised. "What did you say?" "The medicine," Adam replied, standing up. "That one. It's wrong." Laura felt irritation flicker before concern replaced it. "Adam, this is the medicine I always take. It helps me." Adam shook his head. "Not this one." She knelt down in front of him. "Sweetheart, you don't understand what that is." His voice rose, trembling, not with fear but urgency. "I do. It's not for you. It will hurt you." Laura's chest tightened. "Who told you that?" she asked softly, though she already knew. Adam hesitated. "From the book. When I was quiet." A long moment passed. Laura thought of the gas leak, of the technician's serious face, of words her child should not have known. "All right," she said slowly. "I'll check." She picked up the phone and called the pharmacy. The pharmacist, a woman Laura had known for years, answered cheerfully. "Hi, this is Laura Whitman. I picked up my prescription earlier today. I just wanted to double-check that everything is correct." "Of course," the pharmacist replied. Can you read me the number on the label? Laura read it aloud. Silence followed. Then, Mrs. Whitman, the pharmacist said, her voice now tight. Could you come back here right away? Laura's heart began to race. Is something wrong? Yes, please come as soon as you can and bring the bottle. She hung up and stared at the phone, her hands shaking. Adam stood quietly beside her, watching. At the pharmacy, the manager met her at the counter, pale and visibly shaken. There was a system error, she explained carefully. The medication in your bottle is not what you were prescribed. Laura swallowed. What would have happened if I took it? The manager hesitated. With your medical history, a severe reaction, possibly hospitalization. Laura felt the room tilt. I almost took it this morning, she whispered. Back in the car, Laura sat for several minutes before she could drive. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, her breath coming in shallow waves. When she finally reached home, Adam was in the living room, lining up his toy cars. She knelt and wrapped him in her arms, holding him tighter than she ever had. Thank you, she whispered into his hair. Thank you. That night, Laura told Daniel everything. The warning, the phone call, the pharmacist's fear. Daniel paced the room, running his hands through his hair. Twice, he said quietly. Twice now. This isn't imagination, Laura replied. It can't be. Daniel didn't argue. Later, after Adam had gone to sleep, Laura returned to the storage room. The Quran lay open, untouched since earlier that day. She opened the translation again, her eyes drawn to words she did not yet understand but felt compelled to read. And if Allah touches you with harm, none can remove it except Him. Laura closed the book slowly. She was no longer afraid, but she was no longer able to pretend that what was happening could be ignored. The Quran was not simply present in their home. It was protecting it. By the time the third warning came, denial was no longer an option. Daniel had an important business presentation scheduled in another city the following week, one that could determine the future of his department. He had made the trip many times before, always taking the same highway, always leaving at the same hour. The route was familiar, efficient, predictable. Daniel trusted predictability. Adam did not. On Sunday morning, as Daniel reviewed his notes at the dining table, Adam stood quietly in the doorway, watching him with unusual intensity. He did not interrupt. He waited as though timing mattered. Dad, Adam said finally. Daniel looked up and smiled. What's up, champ? Adam stepped closer. His hands were clenched at his sides. You can't go the way you always go. Daniel blinked. What do you mean? The road, Adam said. The big one. Don't take it. Daniel felt a tightening in his chest. He forced a small laugh. That's the fastest way. I've driven it dozens of times. Adam shook his head, his expression serious. Not this time. Laura had stopped moving behind them. She watched the exchange in silence, her heart pounding. Why not? Daniel asked gently. Adam hesitated, then spoke with a certainty that made Daniel's smile fade. There will be a crash. A very bad one. People will get hurt. Daniel stood slowly. Adam, listen to me. Roads don't decide to be dangerous. Accidents happen by chance. Adam's eyes filled with tears. Please, he said. The book said this road isn't safe today. Silence settled heavily between them. Laura stepped forward. Daniel, she said quietly. After everything, Daniel looked at her. He saw the fear she was trying to hide, but the memory of gas leaks and wrong medicine written plainly on her face. He looked back at Adam, who was trembling now, not with fear for himself, but for his father. All right, Daniel said finally. I'll take another route. Adam exhaled, relief washing over his small frame. Thank you. Daniel left later that afternoon, choosing a longer, unfamiliar route that added nearly an hour to his drive. The journey was uneventful. He arrived tired but safe, completed his presentation the next morning, and returned home 2 days later. On Wednesday evening, Daniel turned on the television while unpacking. The news headline froze him in place. A multi-vehicle collision shut down Highway 47 last night. Several critically injured. His breath caught. The footage showed twisted metal, flashing lights, emergency responders rushing between wrecked cars. The reporter mentioned the time of the accident. Daniel would have been there. His hands began to shake. He lowered himself onto the edge of the bed, staring at the screen as realization settled over him like a weight. When he arrived home that night, he did not go inside immediately. He went straight to the storage room. The Quran lay where Adam had left it. Daniel had avoided touching it until now, afraid of what that might mean. Slowly, carefully, he knelt and placed his hand on its cover. "I don't understand," he whispered, "but I'm listening." Later, he found Adam in his room, lining up toy cars as usual. Daniel knelt beside him, his voice unsteady. "You saved me," he said. Adam looked up, confused. "I didn't." "Yes, you did." Adam shook his head. "I just listened." That night, Daniel and Laura sat together in silence, the weight of truth pressing in from all sides. "This is no longer coincidence," Daniel said finally. 3 times, each one clear. Laura nodded. "The Quran isn't just in our house, it's guiding it." Daniel stared at the wall, his thoughts racing. "Then we have a responsibility." "To what?" Laura asked. "To learn," he replied. "To understand what we've brought into our home." From that day on, Daniel began reading the Quran alongside Laura. Slowly, carefully, with questions and humility. And Adam? Adam returned to being a child, playing, laughing, asking for bedtime stories. But when he passed the storage room, he still paused, just long enough to listen. The fourth warning did not arrive with urgency at first. It came quietly, almost gently, which made it even harder to ignore. Laura had not spoken to her younger sister Emily in nearly 3 years. There had been no dramatic falling out, no single argument that could be named and explained. Instead, it had been a slow erosion. Misunderstood words, unreturned calls, resentment left to harden in silence. Time did the rest. Emily lived alone in a nearby town. Laura knew only fragments of her life now, passed along through distant relatives. They existed in separate worlds, tied by blood but divided by pride. That Saturday morning, Adam was unusually thoughtful. He did not go straight to the storage room after breakfast. Instead, he sat quietly at the kitchen table, his legs swinging slightly beneath the chair. Laura noticed him watching her with an intensity that had become familiar. "Mom," he said softly, "you need to call your sister." Laura froze. "Why would you say that?" Adam hesitated, as if weighing how much he was allowed to say. "She's hurting. She's waiting too long." Laura felt irritation rise, sharp and defensive. "Adam, you don't even know Emily. You've never met her." "I know," he replied calmly. "But she's sick." The word landed heavily in the air. "Sick how?" Laura asked, her voice tight. Adam looked down at his hands. "Inside, it's getting worse." Laura's heart began to race. Memories of the gas leak, the medicine, the road Daniel had not taken. She swallowed hard. "What did the book say?" she asked. Adam looked up. "It said not to delay. Delay makes pain heavier." Laura turned away, pacing the kitchen. Every instinct told her this was impossible. Another coincidence, another projection of a child's imagination. Yet she had learned the cost of ignoring these moments. She picked up her phone. The call rang longer than expected. Laura almost hung up when Emily finally answered. "Hello?" Emily's voice was strained. "Emily," Laura said quietly. "It's me." Silence followed. "Is everything okay?" Emily asked cautiously. "I don't know how to say this," Laura replied. "But, are you in pain?" Another pause, longer this time. "How did you know?" Emily whispered. Laura's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "I've been having severe abdominal pain for days," Emily said. "I didn't tell anyone. I thought it would pass." Laura felt tears sting her eyes. "Emily, you need to see a doctor. Today." "I was scared," Emily admitted. "I didn't want to know what it was." Laura's voice broke. "Please, just trust me." An hour later, Laura and Daniel were driving toward the hospital with Adam in the back seat, silent and still. Laura's hands trembled on the steering wheel. She did not speak the entire drive. The diagnosis came quickly: acute appendicitis, close to rupture. The doctor's voice was calm but firm. Another few hours and this would have been life-threatening. Laura sat down hard, her legs giving way. Daniel wrapped an arm around her as she cried, not only from fear but from relief, from guilt, from the weight of years lost to silence. When they were finally allowed to see Emily, she looked pale but awake. Her first words were, "You saved me." Laura shook her head, tears streaming. "We saved each other." Emily's eyes shifted to Adam, standing quietly near the door. "Who is he?" Laura took a breath. "Our son?" Emily studied him, then smiled faintly. "Thank you," she said to him. Adam nodded. "You're going to be okay now." In the weeks that followed, something healed that had nothing to do with surgery. Emily began visiting their home regularly. She sat at the kitchen table with Laura, talking late into the evening, peeling back years of unspoken hurt. Laughter returned, tentative at first, then real. Daniel watched it all unfold with quiet awe. The Quran remained in the storage room, untouched by Emily, unseen by most. Yet its influence was undeniable. It had not only protected lives, it had restored connection. And Laura understood then that guidance was not always dramatic. Sometimes it arrived as a simple call, made just in time. By the time July arrived, the Whitman house no longer felt the same. Nothing visible had changed. The furniture was in the same place, the walls held the same photographs, but the air carried a quiet awareness, as though something unseen had taken up residence among them. Daniel and Laura no longer questioned Adam's time in the storage room. They did not rush him, they did not interrupt. They listened when he spoke. That listening would soon matter more than ever. The weather forecast had warned of storms all week. Summer storms were common in their area, sudden, loud, dramatic, then gone. Laura paid little attention when the alerts appeared on her phone. The sky was still blue that Thursday afternoon, the air warm and heavy. Adam had been in the storage room longer than usual that day. When he came out, Laura knew immediately that something was different. His face was pale, his eyes wide and glassy. He wasn't calm. He wasn't thoughtful. He was afraid. "Mom," he said, his voice shaking. "We have to tell Mrs. Parker." Laura stood up at once. "Tell her what?" Adam swallowed hard. "The tree. The big one behind her house. It's not safe." Mrs. Parker was their neighbor across the street, an elderly widow who lived alone. A massive old oak tree stood in her backyard, its branches stretching over the roof of her house. It had been there longer than anyone could remember. "Adam," Laura said gently, though her heart had already begun to race, "trees don't just fall." "This one will," Adam insisted. Tears slid down his cheeks. "Tonight." Daniel entered the room just in time to hear the last word. "Tonight?" he repeated. Adam nodded. "It will fall where she sleeps." Silence followed, thick, suffocating. Daniel and Laura exchanged a look that carried the memory of every warning that had come before. Neither of them wanted to speak the thought forming between them, but both knew it was already too late to ignore. "I'm going over there," Daniel said, grabbing his jacket. Mrs. Parker answered the door with a kind smile. Daniel explained carefully, choosing his words with humility, not certainty. "I know this sounds strange," he said, "but our son had a strong feeling about the tree in your backyard. He thinks it might fall during the storm." Mrs. Parker's smile faded. She glanced toward the window, toward the darkening sky. "That tree's been inspected," she said softly. "It's been healthy for years." "I understand," Daniel replied. "I just thought it was better to be cautious." Mrs. Parker nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me." When Daniel returned home, Laura searched his face. "She didn't dismiss it," he said, "but I don't know what she'll do." The storm arrived just after nightfall. Rain fell hard and fast, drumming against the roof. Wind howled through the street, rattling windows, bending branches until they groaned in protest. Adam sat close to Laura on the couch, Alent his small fingers gripping her sleeve. Then it happened. A sound like the earth tearing open. The ground shook beneath them. A crash echoed through the neighborhood so loud it stole the breath from Laura's lungs. Daniel ran to the window. The oak tree had fallen. Straight forward, not sideways, not back. It had crushed the roof of Mrs. Parker's house, splintering wood and shattering windows. The section of the house where her bedroom was located was completely destroyed. Laura covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. "Oh no," she whispered. "Oh no." Daniel was already pulling on his shoes, rushing outside into the rain. Neighbors poured out of their houses, shouting, calling emergency services. And then, through the chaos, Mrs. Parker appeared. She stood in the rain, trembling but alive, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her. When she saw Daniel, she broke down. "I slept in the guest room," she sobbed. I couldn't stop thinking about what you said. She looked back at the wreckage, at the crushed bed visible through the broken roof. If I had stayed there... Her voice failed. Laura held Adam tightly as sirens approached. Her child rested his head against her shoulder, exhausted, tears drying on his cheeks. That night, as the storm slowly faded, one truth became impossible to deny. This was no longer protection. It was mercy, arriving exactly when it was needed most. After the night the tree fell, sleep did not come easily to the Whitman house. Sirens, flashing lights, and frightened voices echoed in Laura's mind long after the storm had passed. Daniel lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, replaying the image of Mrs. Parker's crushed bedroom over and over again. If she had not moved rooms, there would have been no miracle to explain. Only tragedy. Adam slept deeply for the first time in days. The next morning, the house felt heavy, as if it were waiting for something to be acknowledged. Daniel moved quietly, making coffee he did not drink. Laura sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug that had already gone cold. We can't keep pretending, Daniel said finally. Laura nodded. I know. They did not need to say what they were pretending about. For weeks, the Quran had remained in the storage room, treated with caution and respect, but still kept at a distance, as though touching it too directly would demand answers they were not ready to give. That morning, something had shifted. Avoidance no longer felt neutral. It felt dishonest. Together they walked down the hallway. The storage room door opened with its familiar creak. Sunlight filtered in through the small window, illuminating the floating dust. The Quran lay exactly where Adam had left it, wrapped neatly in its cloth, calm and unmoved by the chaos it had quietly prevented. Daniel picked it up first. His hands trembled slightly as he placed it on the small table Laura had brought in weeks earlier. Laura sat across from him, her heart pounding. This was no longer curiosity. This was responsibility. They opened the English translation beside the Arabic text. They did not read quickly. They did not skim. They read as people who knew that what they were holding had already proven itself in their lives, long before they understood it. They read about one God, unseen, all-knowing, close. They read about protection without intermediaries, about guidance that came not through images but through words meant to awaken the heart. They read about patience, about trust, about mercy that arrived even when people were unaware they needed saving. Laura's eyes filled with tears. This explains him, she whispered. Daniel nodded. And us. As the hours passed, Adam wandered in quietly. He did not interrupt. He did not sit with them. He simply watched for a moment, then smiled softly. You're listening now, he said. Daniel looked up. Have you always known what this book was? Adam thought for a moment. I didn't know its name, he said, but I knew it wasn't lonely anymore. Laura felt her chest tighten. That afternoon, something changed in Adam. He still played, he still laughed, but the urgency that had once followed him fit. He no longer rushed to the storage room. When he did enter, it was briefly, almost ceremonially. He would touch the book, sit quietly for a moment, then leave. That evening, Laura asked the question she had been afraid to voice. Adam, she said softly, do you still hear the same things from the book? Adam shook his head. Not like before. Why? He looked at her with calm certainty. Because it's not just for me anymore. That night, Daniel and Laura prayed for the first time. Not formally, not with memorized words, but honestly. They spoke to God directly, without fear, without rehearsed language. They asked for forgiveness for what they did not know. They asked for guidance for what came next. And in the silence that followed, neither of them felt alone. The Quran was no longer hidden. It was no longer silent. It had done what it was meant to do, not by force, not by spectacle, but by opening hearts at the exact moment they were ready. And Adam? Adam returned to his toys, to his laughter, to his childhood. His role was ending. Theirs was just beginning. The change did not arrive with an announcement. There was no dramatic declaration, no sudden transformation that demanded witnesses. Instead, it unfolded the way true certainty often does, quietly, firmly, without the need for validation. In the days following that long morning in the storage room, Daniel and Laura moved through their home with a new awareness. The Quran was no longer treated as a fragile mystery. It was placed respectfully on a clean shelf in the living room, Not elevated as an object of display, but present, visible, accessible, acknowledged. Adam noticed immediately. He touched the edge of the shelf one afternoon, smiled to himself, and went back to building a tower of wooden blocks. There was no urgency in him now, no warnings waiting behind his eyes. The weight he had carried so silently was gone. That night, Daniel spoke first. "I think we already know what this means," he said, his voice steady but thoughtful. Laura nodded. "I've been afraid to say it out loud." Daniel took her hand. "Not because it's frightening, but because it's final." They sat together for a long time, the house wrapped in evening stillness. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. Inside, something settled into place. They had read enough, felt enough, witnessed enough. This was not coincidence. This was not imagination. And it was not something they could step away from unchanged. The following morning, they did not rush. They washed, dressed simply, and sat together in the living room. The Quran rested nearby. Adam played quietly on the floor, humming to himself, content. Daniel spoke slowly, carefully, as if each word mattered. "I believe," he said, "that there is one God, that he protected us before we even knew how to ask." Laura felt tears rise, not from fear, but from release. "I believe," she said, "that guidance found us through mercy, not force." They spoke the words without ceremony, without witnesses, without pressure. And in that simplicity, it felt complete. Adam looked up at them, sensing the shift. He stood, walked over, and climbed into Laura's lap. "You're home now," he said softly. Laura held him close, overwhelmed by the truth in a sentence no 3-year-old should have known how to form. Life did not suddenly become easy. Bills still arrived. Work still demanded effort. Questions still existed. But something fundamental had changed, the way they faced the world. Daniel no longer saw control as security. Laura no longer saw anxiety as protection. And Adam was finally just a child. He ran more, laughed louder, asked questions that had nothing to do with danger or foresight. The Quran remained present, but Adam no longer returned to it with urgency. He had delivered what he was meant to deliver. Sometimes, in the evenings, Daniel would read quietly. Laura would listen. Adam would fall asleep nearby, surrounded by the ordinary comfort of family. One afternoon, months later, Laura asked Adam something she had wondered about for a long time. "Do you miss how it was before?" she asked gently. Adam shook his head. "No." "Why not?" "Because now everyone can listen," he said. "Not just me." Laura closed her eyes, gratitude filling her chest. The storage room was cleaned out soon after. Boxes were donated, dust was swept away. The room became a small prayer space, not grand, not decorated, just clean, quiet, and sincere. The house on Willow Creek Lane did not become famous. No crowds gathered, no stories spread beyond a few close neighbors. Yet something extraordinary had happened there, something that did not need proof to endure. A lost book had been found. A lost child had been guided. And a family searching for meaning had discovered direction. Not through fear, not through spectacle, but through the quiet, undeniable pull of truth.